Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Revolution Costa Mesa CA48 candidate town hall. And first off, we just wanted to have a welcome from City Council member Katrina Foley and give her a round of applause.
Thank you, and welcome to Costa Mesa. It's great to have you all here. This is an extremely important race, and it has caused so much civic engagement, so many people coming out to these town halls throughout the season, and it's just wonderful to see. I also love seeing the candidates that are running for Costa Mesa City Council here tonight. Arliss Reynolds, Andrea Marr. And so we hope to have you all helping all of our candidates. And thank you all for participating. Spread the word, and don't forget to vote. And tell all the young people that you know. We need their votes. Thanks so much.
Okay, everyone, just real quick, before we get started, just want to let everybody know if you need to go to the restroom, they're right outside to the left. Other than that, I am going to go ahead and introduce Ms. Fiorella here, who is going to help us moderate this evening. She is from the Combo Couch, and thank you very much. Come on up. Give her a round of applause.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Good. Thank you for coming here today. As it was said before, this is a very important race. Right now, we're a very divided country. We have a president that is not listening to his constituents. In California, we're suffering from a huge housing crisis, homelessness. Healthcare is on everyone's minds as well. And I think it shows all of you being here today have so much invested in this city, in this state, and in our future. So, without further ado, I'd love to have the candidates come up, sit down, and introduce themselves one by one. And we can start with you right here.
The shenanigans start already. He turned off my mic. And the irony is, this is the one time they're going to let me have a mic. Thank you, Convo Couch and Our Revolution, for putting this together. We should have done this months ago, in my personal opinion. Let's have a competitive process of ideas in a primary election. We've got multiple parties represented. We've got different ideas, I promise. We have different ways of solving problems, so we're very excited to hear from you. My name is Kevin Kensinger. I'm running as an independent in the 48th. Thank you very much.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Brandon Reiser. I'm the Libertarian in the race. So for those of you that know about the Libertarian Party, that means we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal. I've met a lot of folks that are here tonight, but there are a lot of folks here that I haven't met. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a husband. I'm a father of two. I live in Corona Del Mar with a 3.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. I work in operations for a very large enterprise. And for those of you that have worked in large companies, you know that you have to work with folks from all ends of the spectrum. You have to really bring people together. You have to unite people as you think about how to get things done. So that's really what I'm bringing to this race. I know that my beliefs may not align perfectly with yours, but it's really my commitment that we go after issues where we find common ground. So I've been out there. I've been hosting town halls. I hosted a town hall last month on gun control because I've heard your voices. I know how important that is as an issue, and as we move forward, I want to continue to listen to you all, and I want to continue to find issues where we can work with folks from all ends of the political spectrum and get things done. And before I pass the mic, I want to leave you all with one thought. The number one issue, whoever advances to the general election, the number one issue is going to be immigration. You must be able to differentiate yourself from Dana Rohrabacher and compete hard on passing DACA through the legislative process, as well as protecting those that are here as undocumented workers that are critical to our economy and they're critical to our communities. So that's something that I want you to mark my words on. You need to compete on immigration. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, that passing DACA through the legislative process will be my #1 issue when I'm elected to represent you all.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. My name is Michael Kotick. A little bit about me. I think I've met almost everyone in the room over the course of the last year. I feel like we all travel in a pack. I was born and raised in Southern California, and I've built my career over the course of the last 10 years, taking large organizations who are failing at their missions and help them turn around to rediscover success. Now, how does that happen? It happens basically because they've lost their way. They need to get back to basics, re-understand people, cut through bureaucracy, and service them better. Those 4 qualities are fundamental qualities that we need to bring back to government. And over my career, what I have learned time and time again are a few key values that really provoked me to step up and run for this seat. I believe that responsible leadership every single time pays off. I believe that listening to the people around you and representing those people pays off. And I believe that being a part of your community pays off. Those 3 things I will never waver on, and those are 3 values that I do not share with Dana Rohrabacher. That is why I am here. We're going to talk a lot about the issues, but the one thing that I would like to keep in your minds tonight as you are listening to all the candidates here, who are all fantastic candidates, who is going to excite, who is going to inspire, and who is going to bring people off of the couches and to mail in their ballots or into the polling places to ensure that they vote this time. I will tell you that in 2014, 10% of those people who are Democrats and no party preferences were under the age of 42. In 2016, that number was 30%. That number will grow by thousands, as we all saw marching last Saturday. Those people don't vote because we tell them who to vote for and when to vote. They vote because it means something to them. That is what you need to be looking for tonight. That is what is going to flip this seat, and that is what I'm here to do. Thank you very much for being here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Martin. I'm a native of Orange County. I've lived here my whole life, other than a 2-year work assignment in London, England. I am a Republican running, and you want to know why, right? Right? Let me tell you why. A couple reasons. Number one, our country is a mess. And it's a mess because of the Trump agenda, which I have been writing and speaking about going back in 2015. I'm a writer and a blogger, and through most of my career, I've been a social entrepreneur. Our country is a mess, and our district is in big trouble. And the reason our district is in big trouble is because incumbents usually win. That's the way it works. The Democrats, friends up here and their great candidates, have a bit of a math issue that we read about every single day. And the problem now with Scott Baugh in the race, of course, is that we have the chance of Baugh versus Rohrabacher, which, as far as I'm concerned, if you're not outspoken against the racism and the misogyny and the xenophobia of Donald Trump, you are complicit. I saw someone with a shirt that talked about silence. The reason I'm in the Republican Party is because it needs to be reformed. And some of us are staying in the Republican Party, people like John Kasich. These people believe that the party has been hijacked. And if I'm a Democrat, Republicans no longer listen to me. So I have a voice within the Republican Party. I get hammered all day by Democrats saying that I'm complicit. I am one of them. I have lost friends and family over my stance against Trump. And I have worked with people on the left, including Reza Aslan, including Shannon Watts, who has retweeted me because of my positions on gun violence. She's the head of Moms Demand Action. I was in New York last week with Gary Kasparov and Bill Browder, who founded the Magnitsky Act, and I worked tirelessly for issues of human rights and social justice and civil rights, even though I'm a Republican. I'm in this race because I believe the Republican Party has to change. And I will get attacked from people on the far left as much as I will get attacked by people on the far right, but I'm willing to pay that price because I believe our country needs a lot of help. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. Our political system is undoubtedly at an all-time low. You know, we see greed and corruption and self-interest and self-preservation. We've got special interests that are rampant and controlling via their money. Almost every politician there, and indeed President Trump. And I think we're well past the time where we need to put facts first, where we need to put science first, where we need to put issues. Can you imagine issues in front of anything partisan, politics? My name is Dr. Hans Keirstead. I'm a neuroscientist and I'm a medical researcher. And with your help, and if the polls are correct, that just came out from third-party groups, Facebook funded, I'm going to take out Dana Rohrabacher in another few months. And that is just something that we are well in need of. And then with your help, I'll be impeaching and taking out Trump soon enough. You know, those Washington politics, I reject them. We've even seen a lot of it here. You know, my degrees have been challenged. A private investigator has been hired to follow my staff around and harass them at their houses. This type of infighting and political infighting, especially with their own party, it's just too much. How about we focus on Washington? When we've got 120 of the 435 districts in our beautiful country having suffered from massacres, how about we focus on that? When we've got 120 cubic tons of pollutants being put into our air every 24-hour period, let's focus on that. When medical companies and insurance companies are devastating families with outrageous premiums, unattainable drug prices, let's focus and regulate that. And when we still have inequality, the Helms Act, the Himes Act, 80 cents on the dollar for women, Planned Parenthood being attacked, let's focus on that. When we've got a president spreading racism, Mexicans, he said, are rapists. Muslims are terrorists. Puerto Ricans are lazy. People of color are shameful. While he's elevating white supremacists, it is time we stand up and take some action. And that's what I'm going to do. My name's Hans Keirstead. I've been endorsed by the California Democratic Party, and I'm going to fight this fight, and I'm going to take out Dana Rohrabacher with your help. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Omar Siddiqui, and I'm running for Congress in California's 48th District as a Democrat against Dana Rohrabacher. Putin's favorite congressman. By background, let me tell you about me. By background, I'm an engineer. I got my bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering from the University of Southern California. Any Trojans in the room? I'm sure there's Bruins too. Bruins. There's a Bruin back here too, right? After graduating with my master's in engineering, I went to law school, and I'm a graduate of Loyola Law School, where I'm currently a trial attorney. I fell in love with trial advocacy and fighting for the underdog. One of my professors at Loyola Law School was the infamous Johnny Cochran, and he put that fight into everything that he did. So that was something that an experience that I will never forget. After law school, I joined a large law firm where I worked for several years, and then I started my own law firm in the early 2000s. It was in 2010 when I was recruited by the FBI to serve as an advisor on national security and counterterrorism, because a few years before that, I had uncovered and derailed President George W. Bush's Operation Flex program, which was an unconstitutional spy program spying on our nation's religious centers, mosques, synagogues, churches. We derailed that. We stopped that. President Obama wanted me to work on the front lines of national security. Now, if you had asked me when I graduated law school that I would be serving and working with the FBI on counterterrorism, I would think that you've been watching one too many Jason Bourne movies. But the reason it was important to me is because I felt that it was doing something for my country. I felt that I was doing something at the front lines to help who we are and what we're going to do. It was in November of 2015 when I was venting to President Obama about this candidate Trump, who he was talking about the Muslim ban and building walls and deporting and gun control, all the things that we had worked so hard for. President Obama, he let me go on for several minutes before he stopped. He said, stop. What are you going to do about it? You changed FBI policy from the outside, but what are you going to do to effectuate change? Are you waiting for someone? Are you waiting for a Martin Luther King? Are you waiting for a JFK to come? Because they're not going to come. You are that person. We are that people. We are the people that will bring change. At that moment in time, of course, when the President of the United States gives you a suggestion, you reflect on it, you think about it, but I still wasn't convinced. Do I want to be a congressman? Do I want to go from the realm of being a private attorney to a congressman? It was in April of last year, I had a meeting with FBI Director Comey. And Director Comey, I told him, President Obama thinks I should do something, bring change, what do you think? And he said, you know what, there's no time to stand around. You should do something. So I told Director Comey that I was hosting an event in LA and I would think about it. Director Comey promised to come to LA. He came to LA. I was on my way to see him, and I get the message that he had been fired. I go down in history as being the appointment that he missed, first appointment he missed, because he was fired by President Trump. Indeed, there was no time to stand around. Indeed, there is no time for any of us to stand around. My name is Omar Siddiqui. I'm running for Congress. I intend to bring that change. Please join me in that endeavor. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is John Gabbard. I'm a Republican candidate for the district. A little bit about my background. I had the pleasure of serving for 17 years in the Marine Corps. I'm sorry. I spent 17 years in the Marine Corps as an officer and enlisted Marine. I put my life on the line so all of us could be free, and it was the opportunity of a lifetime. I had a lot of wonderful Marines that I worked with, and they were the salt of the earth, and it was an honor to serve with them. The reason why I'm running for this race is, like everyone else, I see the problems that we're having here, but I also know that we're a country of great diversity and wonderful, wonderful people. I want all of us to, as we go through this evening, I know that there's going to be a lot of contentious issues, but I want everyone here to kind of look within themselves and say there is good in all of us, and that we all want the same thing for this country, and that's for all of us to prosper, all of us to work together and achieve the American dream. So with that, I'll just say thank you, and I look forward to the questions.
Hello, good evening. I'm Rachel Payne, and I too am running for Congress in the 48th District. Thank you so much for allowing us to come together.
Of course, thank you.
It's a real honor to be here, and that's what's missing in this country, is the ability to come together and to have a conversation. One that isn't filled with rhetoric that divides us, but instead a conversation about how we can come together and find solutions and work together for a better outcome for everybody. I come from a working class family. When I saw the list of topics tonight, I was really encouraged because so many of them are very personal to me. I was the first in my family to go to college, and I paid for it myself. Became the first independent student at Smith College. I took on a lot of loans. I bet many parents in here know what that feels like. I took on a lot of loans, I won a lot of scholarships, and eventually I made my way into the tech sector, which looks a lot like this, actually. And while I was in tech as a woman for 20 years, I had the amazing opportunity to help build some of the most amazing companies you've heard of. I was early stage eBay. I was at Google as an executive for 8 years. But throughout my career, the through line has always been, how can technology make people's lives better? I didn't just join tech to do that. I joined it because I wanted to have a positive impact. And some of the things I worked on really gave me a firsthand understanding of what so many people are struggling with. I was on the founding team of Google.org and drew up the blueprints for the world's first billion-dollar hybrid philanthropy and investment fund. But what we focused on is what matters. We looked at public health, global public health issues. We looked at global poverty alleviation, climate change. And when I think about what's happening right now in this country, there are so many lessons to be learned about what to do and what not to do. And we are looking at a situation where so many people are falling behind. Income stagnation, lack of affordable housing, spiraling debt. And when we think about the cost of health care, it's just too much. It's unaffordable. My family struggled. My mom was a single mom with 3 kids. She worked 2 and 3 jobs at a time to take care of us. And I understand that so many families are struggling to pay for rent and for their loans and for everything else that's piling on. And yet we look around and we see that the 0.1% just got the biggest tax giveaway in modern history. We need new leadership. We need new leadership at the highest levels of government. And you know what? On Saturday, when all of those students marched, they showed us who the leaders of this country are. And I was proud to march with them. We need to bring in a new generation of leaders. And hopefully, people who represent maybe the other half of the population as well. Because we've got ideas too, and we've got experience as well. I've worked with heads of state in other countries to help build technology ecosystems so people could thrive, so they could have access to the capital and create the businesses that create the jobs of the future. We don't do enough of that here. Think about what we could do just in Orange County with the right political will, the kind of technology ecosystem we could build here today, and the kind of jobs that could be designed to help ensure good paying wages for more people. Because of my technology background, I can tell you with certainty that the frontier issues of public policy are very much related to technology. Whether it's the integrity of our elections and how they were hacked, cybersecurity and the threat of our personal information like we saw last week with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and I can go into that in a lot more detail. There's a lot of technology issues that are looming, but there's no one right now who is taking the lead, starting here in this district, to help us get ahead of those issues. Automation, which will create labor disruption and challenges for people who are trying to find new jobs. Or artificial intelligence. I'm currently the CEO of an AI company, and I can tell you, artificial intelligence can create as many jobs as it destroys, but it's not going to happen by accident. So we need planning, we need process, and we need people who know how to collaborate to find a better outcome. And that is what I hope to bring to you, and it would be an honor to serve you. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Harley Rouda, running for the 48th District against Dana Rohrabacher. Thank you. I'm thrilled you are all here tonight. It's amazing how we have seen such large groups of folks come from across the district, across the country, that are fully engaged in the political process, and that's what we need. That's what our foremothers and forefathers expected out of us, to reach across the aisle, to talk about politics, to talk about issues, and not talk about personalities. And you're here today to talk about important issues. You want to ask questions of us, whether it's social injustice, income and wealth inequality, climate change, livable wages for workers. I want to get into those topics, and I'm going to do something that politicians don't do. I'm not going to stay up here and keep talking. I'm going to turn it over to you guys so you can start asking your questions. But thank you. But before I do that, and I won't go much longer, I promise, please go to harleyforcongress.com. You can read my bio there. And I'll leave you with 2 thoughts before we start opening it up to your questions. This energy is tangible across our country right now. And I abhor Donald Trump. But one good thing that may come out of Donald Trump is the fact he may move the progressive movement faster and farther than anything else because of folks like you getting engaged in the process. And the second thing I'll say is that this Saturday we all had the opportunity to see our young leaders show what can be done in our great country. And somebody said, only in the United States can you have a bunch of high school students acting like the leaders of the free world while the leader of the free world acts like he's in high school. And it's true. And it's true. But we should all take great heart in recognizing that that generation who will be leading our country, that we are in good hands. So God bless America and God bless those kids, and we're looking forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much for answering the questions. There are a lot of you, so we're going to have the audience questions right now. When you answer the questions, not everyone's going to be able to answer the same question. Obviously, we'll be here all night. And we would love it if not the same people ask the same or ask questions, okay? So without further ado, let's go ahead and have our first audience question.
This question is specifically for Harley. I'm curious about what you would do for women. I know that you've supported your friend Kotick, who told a woman who was a victim of sexual violence that maybe she shouldn't show up at parties with a lot of alcohol. I know that you've accepted $5,500 from Kleiner Perkins, which is pretty infamous for gender discrimination and sexual harassment. It's nothing compared to the $500,000 plus that you've loaned
What's
yourself.
What's the question?
That's the question. I started with the question, which is what he would do for women.
It's okay. Just if you could just ask the question to make this process go a little further.
So that was my question. What would you do for women, considering that?
Sure. Have no idea what donation you're talking about, but
Kleiner Perkins Caulfield Byers. It's a venture capital firm. Rachel Payne's probably familiar. It's one of the most infamous.
So an individual there made a contribution to our campaign?
Well, I can go online.
It's not a corporate contribution. I can guarantee you that. So anyway, I do want to address the John Kotick thing because that's an unfair statement, and I'll tell you why. John Kotick and Karen Kotick are friends of my family. In fact, Karen Kotick was in our wedding. And I do not agree with John Kotick's position on a lot of social issues. But one thing I do like about John Kotick is the fact that he'll reach across the aisle and put the work of the country first and party second. And because of that, I respect him. My wife and I have been long-term donors for Planned Parenthood, and we will continue to do that. We have fought domestic violence as well, both here in the district and across the United States. We have supported HRC and HRW, which also helps address these very important issues, and I will continue to do just that, and I hope that you will join me in that fight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess my question is for Kevin and Michael, maybe. So presumably everybody who is running for the seat wants to be able to write bills and move forward legislation. So my question to you guys is, what will you do to write something that will reform campaign finance?
Great question.
Is this thing on? Last time you turned it off on me. Okay, so campaign finance, it's a good question. And first, I think the way I'll start this is by acknowledging a pledge that I made very early in the campaign, which was to take no corporate PAC money, no special interest money. And there's a third one that I didn't. There's a third one, but all the key ones. Here's an example, and to be very, very clear that we are holding ourselves up to that pledge. I received an unsolicited donation. Gosh, it must have been back in January, for several $1,000s from a pharmaceutical senior executive in Massachusetts that I had never talked to. In 24 hours, he got that donation back because we're not taking it. So to be very clear and to answer your question, I think we need to upturn Citizens United because the things that are happening in this country, specifically, that are allowing corporations and large special interests to dominate the narrative of ordinary, everyday people like you and me is unfair, and we can see what's happening. It is one of the main reasons why I got into this race, because I feel like as a country, we all have more in common than we don't. Yet if you watch any political ad, look at most candidates, watch the news, it feels like we are very far apart, and that's just not where we are. We are a lot closer together. We need to be having those conversations and be sitting in the middle. There are a number of different things that I pledge to do. First and foremost is to look at things like government matching programs so everyone has an opportunity to contribute to a campaign and be in the political process, because right now it is a middle class and a wealthy game to contribute to campaigns, and we all know what happens when that happens. Overturn Citizens United and do a host of other things to make sure that everyone has a chance to run, to express their ideas, and to win if their ideas are the most popular with their community. I will tell you right now, we have an entire generation of millennials that are swimming in debt, that are not involved in the political process as much as they could be, and they're not running as much as they could be because they can't figure out how to put the money together to do it. That is restricting the fact that millennials are the largest voting bloc in this country, but only have 9 people in the House of Representatives. It doesn't make sense. Campaign finance is at the root of that, and we need to take care of it, frankly, at a broader scale.
Unsolicited, spontaneous thousands of dollars? That is not a problem we run into. All right, so what can, where'd she go? What can we do to write legislation? That is a can of worms because it immediately involves 2 chambers of Congress, right? The last bipartisan campaign finance reform we had was McCain-Feingold. I know you're all very familiar with that one. What it ultimately resulted in is what we call hard and soft money, and that's how we got PACs, right? So that's why there's individual donations, and then there's corporate donations that are unlimited, and they can go to the PACs. So how do we fight that system? Because in the last 30 years, the millennial generation, as Michael mentioned, is a huge voting bloc that has been disenfranchised, and personally, if I may speak for the generation, we don't care about your delegates, we don't care about your endorsements, and we don't care how much money you have. If you want us to show up to vote, give us something to vote for. Stop telling us to vote for the person that's been ordained by the party and funded with PAC money. We've got almost 60 days until the election, and like I joked about earlier, this is one of the first times some of us have met. This is the most politically activated climate any of us have ever seen since the 60s. Again, I wasn't there. And we can't get, no offense, not to be an ageist, but this is a relatively older crowd, right? I've seen a lot of faces before. You've all seen me at your grassroots events. How often do I get to speak? Almost never, because I'm not a registered Democrat, so they don't want to let us talk, right? And I get it, so I'll be a fly on the wall, but I've had 3-hour coffees with all of your grassroots leaders, your delegates, all of them. And they don't sit at 3-hour coffees because they don't like who they're talking to. And they always tell me, love you, wish you would run as a D, then you'd have a bunch of money. Okay, how many people vote based on the every door direct mail you get? Those nice glossy pieces of paper that you get inundated with over the next 60 days. Do you vote for the person on that? Do you care? Do you throw it away immediately? All right, we're gonna spend millions of dollars on TV commercials. $6.1 billion spent in the 2016 election. TV commercials. Anybody here not have a DVR? But you don't have a TV. Well, then the DVR is irrelevant.
So what's your plan? What's your...
Perfect. So my plan is twofold. Number one, run a campaign that proves that we can do this without the money, because I do believe we're at a tipping point. If you're going to learn anything from Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump, it's that you can be anti-establishment on a shoestring budget if you are popular and you inspire. Now, Donald inspired based on fear and cynicism, but Barack and Bernie inspired people on hope and change and legislative solutions. So how are you going to get bipartisan legislation done? That's pretty tough. There are 2 cases. one in Wisconsin, one in Maryland that are in the Supreme Court right now, working on gerrymandering. That's part of the process. But by running a campaign on a shoestring budget focused on millennials and online activity, the Russians hacked us for 160 grand. I don't need millions of dollars to market to little 48th district. All right? Thank you.
So we are going to have to shorten the time you have per answering questions overall. There's so many of you and so many more questions we have to get to. Who's next?
Don't give up the mic.
Hello. My question is, this is for the Democratic candidates. What is your position specifically on SB 54 and more generally on sanctuary cities? Thank you.
Any volunteers?
Steve's one of my favorite. You've probably seen him on our Twitter feed. Steve is a tracker working for the Republican Party. So the question there is relevant for the Republican Party wanting to know where we stand on sanctuary cities. First of all, sanctuary cities has different meanings for different people. And the Republican definition that we see on Fox News is very different from the definition that many of us hold in this room. And what we believe in this room is that people who are residents of our communities, who are hardworking, part of the fabric of our communities, have the right to be able to live without fear of being deported by being involved in that community, by supporting that community, by reporting on crimes that take place in that community. And the sanctuary cities' purpose is to make sure that when they come forward to speak with law enforcement officers, they can do that knowing that they are not in jeopardy of being deported simply because they are involved in telling the truth and working with local law officials. Thank you. Those same local law officials also know if those individuals are violent felons, then they will call ICE in. So we have the right balance here in California, and I support that balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to answer that question? Yes, go ahead. The microphone is right there.
Okay, I got it. So I'm a vehement supporter of California's decision on 54. We've got to support state decisions. In Congress, that is our role. We can stand up for that as well. But I'd also like to bring your awareness to something else that happened in Alabama recently. So HB 56 was passed in Alabama, which prohibited the employment or the rental agreements with undocumented immigrants. Okay? And then every school teacher and every law enforcement agent was given the right to perform citizen's arrest on those individuals. And that was passed in Alabama. And you know what happened? Almost immediately, we had 11 million people leave and an $11 billion hit to that area because of their contributions. So undocumented immigrants contribute $3 billion to California. They contribute $12 billion to Social Security, a contribution that they will never, ever, unless we provide a path to citizenship, they will not be able to get. These are individuals who are fighting hard to be here. Of course there are bad apples in that crowd. There are bad apples in any crowd, but we needn't punish millions of workers for one or two bad apples. It is not the way to go. We cannot lump DACA in there and hurt these children, and not only their children, but their families. These are individuals who gave their addresses up to be protected, and then they were abandoned by the government. They were absolutely abandoned. And now that is pitting them against their parents. So absolutely we must defend what we have done in here in California with everything that we're worth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Many believe that SB 54 is a threat to our country, but it's not. What is a threat to our country is if we destroy and separate families. Bottom line. On the record, Dana Rohrabacher. What needs to happen is our country needs to take a serious look at immigration. My father was an immigrant who came to America in the 1950s, post-World War II, for a better life and a higher education. I was born and raised in Orange County. I've lived in Orange County. I'm a native. But there's one thing for sure, is there's many families who have immigrated here also for a better life. But what we cannot do is separate and destroy and break up families. DACA needs to be implemented. We need a clean DACA bill that offers a pathway to citizenship. But we cannot just think only of the dreamers, so to speak. We must also remember the other 11 million undocumented in our country. It is not just a matter of immigration. It's a matter of national security. Please, please support a Democrat on the ticket.
Thank you.
I want to highlight for the gentleman over here that the position that Dana Rohrabacher currently takes on immigration is completely out of step with the people that he represents and Americans. 83%, thank you. 83% of Americans support DACA recipients and having a clean pathway to citizenship. 83%, 67% of Republicans. This is a politicized issue. It's a distraction. It allows people to target the most vulnerable so that they don't have to look at what's really going on. And what's going on is troubling. We don't need a new wall. We need new infrastructure in our country. We need jobs. And we need to protect the people who came here because we sold them the American dream. And they're doing the work. They're integrating in our communities. They're part of our schools and our churches and our stores and places we go. And are an integral part of both our economy and our society. We are all immigrants. If you weren't part of the first peoples, Native Americans, we're all immigrants. That's who we are. And our strength as America is in our diversity. It's in what happens when you bring people from different backgrounds together and we create this American dream, which is eroding. And what we've sold people, we're taking away from them. And that's not okay. I support a very clean path to citizenship, and I also support sanctuary cities, for the record. And what we're seeing right now in Los Alamitos and at the Aliso Viejo mayor, who's going on record challenging California's law and saying that it's a threat, again, it's an operation of distraction and deceit and deflection because this administration is in trouble and they'll do anything they can to prevent us from seeing what's really going on. Let's not blame our neighbors. Let's blame the leaders.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. Okay, real quick.
Yeah, I would just like to say to Dana and anyone over there in Republican land, hi guys. You don't like me very much, but my real last name is Martin, like Ricky Martin. My dad's Mexican. He grew up in the city of Orange and remembers no Mexican signs. And he was lucky enough to have light skin, and he didn't have to go to the segregated school that many of his cousins had to go to. He lived right in Old Town Orange, and there was a segregated school up in El Medina, if you know the area. I grew up with a mother who immigrated with her family from Italy. In the 1950s, she was mocked and ridiculed all the time for not just being Italian and not being able to speak English, but for being Catholic, right? So I think on this issue of immigration, we just need to remember that racism and bigotry and xenophobia go back to the beginning of time. And the Republican Party, and Donald Trump specifically, has found a way to leverage that, instinctive, I don't know if it's instinctive, innate hate that is within people. We saw it with the comment about Judge Curiel, who was an American, who happened to be Mexican, and Trump said he couldn't do his job because of that. We saw it after Charlottesville, where Trump said there were many good people marching on both sides, of course, and some were neo-Nazis. Neo-Nazis are never good people. I want to say one more quick thing. And we're all in agreement here. I mean, this is where I could easily, I mean, these are my brothers and sisters as far as I'm concerned, because we are in agreement on this. And I remain in my party again so that I could speak into cameras like that and tell these people that they are not going to take our country down. There's a movement happening with young people and women, and we're going to take it back. And many Republicans, we bring up John Kasich, are going to be part of that movement to take our country back from people like Dana Rohrabacher that want to divide based on race.
Thank you. And we will have the next question, please.
Hi, my name is Kathleen. I'm a Democrat in Fountain Valley and now 65 years old and loving Medicare. First, I want to thank all of you because I feel like what we have is a good field of people to choose from. But I want to address the donkey in the room, which is that most of us don't go to bed at night worried as much about Trump right now as our own ticket. And I want to thank Laura Oatman, who had... I'm saying all this with love first, before I hit with my question. She was brave. She fell on the sword. She had good polling numbers, but she didn't have rocket polling numbers. So my Democratic friends, I don't want just a one-word answer on this one. How quickly are you going to look at the reality and the polls and join Laura in backing, I'm not going to say who, somebody that can go against, I'm sorry, I just learned about you tonight, I'm so sorry. We should have done this 3 months ago. But seriously, I don't want a one-word answer. I want to hear courage. I want to hear the understanding of math. And I want to hear that more than Laura is going to say very soon, I'm going to graciously bow out. I'm going to give all my time to one other person, pick the person, and let's get this thing narrowed down because we are in a crisis. Have at it.
So I think she's asking if you had to drop out, which candidate you would endorse, and we can make this a quick one. Does anyone want to answer that? Yeah.
We want to see some leadership from the people on the stage. It is time to coalesce.
So you looked at me for half of that, so I'm going to step up first if that's okay. Sorry about that. No, you're good. And as passionately as you communicated the question, let me first say that I hear you. The indivisible groups and the huddle groups and all of the groups are very robust on this narrative. But let me also provide some insight from my perspective, and I can give you the math as well, sprinkled on top. Does that work? I've had less. Okay. No, just kidding. So the first place to start, I think, is the full recognition that all of us have been engaged for about a year. Less than that, 30 years. No, I'm saying on this race in particular. I know I've started seeing most of you for the last 9 months or so. Here's the challenge, and this is truth that I am giving you, is my team and I have knocked on 10,000 doors in the last 3 months. Do you know how many people can name a single person on this stage? Less than 10. Do you think that's first of all, no one's going to split evenly. Like, that's not a real thing. But here's the deal.
Can we please let him answer the question, please? Thank you.
So here's the other piece of that is vote splitting happens when you have the same type of candidate going after the same type of audience. That's when vote splitting happens. Here's what I will tell you, and I will speak from my perspective, because before I filed, I got a poll back that told me and informed exactly did I have a chance in this race. And my hurdle was the same hurdle that we all agreed to back in Seal Beach, which was 20%. And I cleared that hurdle, so I filed. Here's what's different, even with the entrance of Scott Baugh. And I'm going to lay all the strategy out. Where's the tracker?
Can you please make this quick? We're spending a lot of time on this question.
I don't think they want this to be brief. You can cut me off anytime you guys want, but I'm going to walk through my logic on this because I think it's important that we all share our point of view. There are three things that are credible about my campaign that are different than anyone else on this stage. Number one, I have easily 2 times the amount of appeal with young people across all political affiliations. That matters. That is not a vote-splitting issue. That is a real thing. Because I got to tell you, it doesn't matter if it's an R, an I, or a D, or an L. Young people are going to go where they're inspired, and if they're not, they're going to stay home. That is a problem. Number two, I will also tell you that this entire process has everyone fighting over the 20-some-odd% of people in this district who are Democrats. Guess what? There are just as many people in this district who are no party preference. You will not flip this seat with just Democrats. My candidacy is the only one of anyone on this stage that double-digit enters into the NPP space, and I think that's important because you want to know where Scott Baugh is going to get his votes? Right there. So unless we have someone on this stage who can reach in and at the very least, offset his gains, you're going to have vote splitting no matter which way you slice it. So if you ask me, this candidacy needs to be in the race to ensure that doesn't happen. And if we push someone through who cannot attract an NPP or a millennial, you can kiss the flip the district goodbye.
Thank you. And I just want to say for the record, the question should be very simple and as clear as possible so we have clear answers as well. Thank you.
Excellent question. I'm really glad you asked that. So I've been a Democrat since coming to this nation and lived in Canada prior, had those values. And I, ever since getting into this race, have said that I will get out of the race if I'm not in a lead position. And I've said that well before any endorsements and well before any votes at CDP and et cetera. And I firmly believe that it is more important that a Democrat get into this seat than Hans Keirstead. I've always believed that is the case. And I've acted that way, and I've stood by that. What is keeping me in the race, just very quickly, is all those phone calls that I made to those club leaders and club representatives and going on Sundays and Friday nights and Tuesday nights to all those clubs and working the rooms and the delegates and looking for their votes. And I can tell you this, and I promise you this, every time I phoned a delegate, they'd say, oh my God, I've had calls from every single candidate. Today, 3 times, that type of thing. But I got that vote, so I earned that vote. I had 63% of that CDP vote. That buoyed me. Then, you know, between endorsements, yes, those are great. Money, yes, that's great. But it was also on the ground. So we have been joined by, I don't know how many people. It's well over 1,000 now on our campaign, and we're just starting up our groundwork, and it is working. The polls that we did, and I'm a scientist. I do real polls. I'm not doing a poll to make myself look good. I'm doing a poll because I'm a scientist and I need to know, because I was the one who said I would drop out if I wasn't in the lead. I didn't say if I didn't get 20%, I said if I wasn't in the lead. And my polls, as well as the Fight Back California poll that just published 2 weeks ago, has me and Rohrabacher winning this race. That's why I'm staying in. And I want to tell you, educate you, if you don't know this, about why that is. Both my polls and those polls, when you go a little bit deeper into Rohrabacher, Keirstead, Scott Baugh, Rouda, and others, in that order, this is why. It's called a voter response. So if anyone in this room starts talking about the big 4 things that move voter responses, which are anti-Trump, healthcare, the environment, and assault weapons, that's what the national polls say, as well as the polls in this district, our internal polls and several external polls, talk about those issues, and it brings voter response up to here. When you have every single candidate in this race talk about those issues, it brings it right back up to there. When I talk as a scientist about the environment, my voter response score goes up 8 times. 8 times more than others because I'm a scientist talking about a deeply scientific issue. When a lifelong healthcare professional, 15 years professor at UCI and building and selling biotech companies and work with the FDA and working with on the Hill, changing policy in the Senate and the House, when a healthcare executive talks about healthcare, my voter response score goes up 8 times. I can go on and on. Scientist is regarded by the public, I didn't know this, as a truth teller. There's very few jobs where people equate truthfulness to. Scientist is one of them. When a truth-telling scientist talks about anti-Trump messaging, voter response is 8x. That's why I'm running. 1/3 of the contributions to my campaign, and of everyone on this stage, I am by far and wide above the natural contributions. Not me padding it. I have done 24% padding of my own money, and I'll do a lot more if it needs it. But I have received more donations from individuals than anyone else in this race, I think by 2x or more. I'm not sure what the exact number it is, but it is by far and wide the most. Every quarter after quarter after quarter.
Thank you. Can you just wrap it up?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
I'll wrap this up. And so I want you to know that of those donations, 1/3 of them come from Republicans because they care about their health care and they care about their businesses. Healthcare affects businesses because it is the major burn besides the cost of the employee. It is my major burn as a company. They relate to an individual who can better their businesses, not only because I built and sold a bunch of companies, but because I can lower their bills, and the Republicans, they get cancer too. For that reason, I can pull from those individuals and their votes and their cash. That's, I'm guessing, why I'm in the lead position right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As an engineer and a lawyer, I have to look at facts, I have to look at numbers, I have to look at data. But one thing, despite everything I've done, despite me being a lawyer engineer working with the government, I got a very hurtful and painful message yesterday, which was, although you're the most qualified candidate, although you have met with presidents and worked with secretaries of state, one thing that you do not have is a regular name. And it said, because of your name alone, Omar Siddiqui, drop out. No one will vote for you, even though you're the most qualified and educated candidate, no one will in the 48th district will vote for Omar. That hurt. And I lost sleep last night, and I responded this morning at about 4 a.m. I typed it up. And in my response, in fact, if it's okay, I'm just going to read it. Thank you for your message, which was received, as you can imagine, with great emotion. It was very hurtful and painful to read, but the more I read it, the more I reread it, it brought both tears and great inspiration to me. Your name being Martin as well was so symbolic too. It reminded me of what people told Martin Luther King Jr. to sit aside. This isn't your time. He responded with a testament of a dream on the steps of the sacred Lincoln Memorial, that one day America would judge not by the color of skin, but by the content of one's character. Your message brought back memories of a conversation I had with President Barack Hussein Obama. While running for president of the United States, people reminded him that he was black, that his middle name was Hussein, and that his last name rhymes with Osama, and that his family was Kenyan Muslim. But in the spirit of Martin Luther King, he responded with this: when we face down impossible odds, when we've been told that we're not ready or that we shouldn't try or that we can't, generations of Americans have responded with a simple creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. He put his arm around me that day and told me, yes, you can. Join me on the right side of history. Help us spread the message that in our great country, everything and anything is possible. I know in your heart that that's the America we and Martin Luther King dreamed of. Let's be the change that we seek. Let's make that a reality. Yes, we can. I'm not dropping out because of my name. I'm not dropping out because of who I am. I want you to vote for me because of my character, my background, and what I've done. Statistics and math. I don't know how much time I have left, but statistics and math. I've knocked on thousands of doors, made thousands of phone calls. We are aware of the Fight Back California poll that came out recently. And yes, that poll indicates that when you vote only on a Laura, a Hans, or a Harley, Michael, Omar by itself doesn't do anything. In fact, it might be scary to some people like Hussein Obama. But once you add the description and you talk about what I've done for our nation and the sacrifices that I make, we skyrocket. And if you look at that poll as well, that poll doesn't take into account the 40% of our district that's our people of color, the Vietnamese community in Garden Grove, the Latin community in Costa Mesa and Santa Ana. Take into consideration that I am the candidate that wants to represent everybody. We have raised over $600,000 up with the top two candidates, Dr. Keirstead.
Please begin wrapping it up, I'm sorry.
We have spent $70,000 on this campaign, where my competitors, the top two, have spent close to $400,000. We haven't even started our engines yet. Our own internal data indicates that with our ground game and our money, we are going to be comfortable where we are. We have to remember two things. That as Michael said, our race is going to be dependent on the no party preference, the millennials, and the people of color who've showed up to run and vote. That is what we need to remember as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Finally. Quite frankly, what I think is going to hurt the Democrats the most is the attacks on each other. We as Democrats need to support each other and stop attacking each other.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the next question. And I just want to remind all of you to stick to the issues. Would you like to go? Okay.
When I entered the race, I was told I was too young, I was too inexperienced, and I should wait my turn. And these last few days, I've been getting a lot of similar messages about how I should just back one of the guys and step aside and wait, which I appreciate where that's coming from, because what's coming from is fear. Because we can't bear to have Dana Rohrabacher in for one more term, and I am with you on that. I am absolutely with you on that. I met him 10 years ago, and I've had my eye on him since then. And there isn't an issue on the planet that we do agree on, that I know of. But we can't be ruled by fear. And when one woman running is one too many, and we have less than 19% representation at the highest levels of government, what kind of America is this? Yes, I have a great ground game, I have a great digital game, I've got a lot coming. But when you think about the math, if we were to really coalesce, then we should have all dropped out on March 11th, because nonetheless, everyone's name's on the ballot and the math doesn't really change. We're all on the ballot. So the best thing that we can do, and this is my promise, is to go out and find those people who don't have high propensity voting records, who are under threat, who are concerned about voting. Maybe it's the NPPs, maybe it's millennials, maybe it's a lot of women, but it's also people who haven't regularly voted in midterms that we often overlook. And when I looked at that Monte Carlo simulation, I looked at all the models, the number one thing that became super clear to me in those predictions, it's all about getting out the vote, it's all about increasing registration, and let's go and get so many of those student leaders who are now new voters to join this wave, to turn this district blue, and to capture the new votes that are coming from people who haven't been engaged, whose voices haven't been heard, and who've been ignored by this representative in particular. So I will make that promise, and I tell you this, if I think that this isn't going to go anywhere, I will drop out. But I'm getting a lot of momentum and a lot of excitement. I'm the only candidate that has national endorsement. Yes, I am the only candidate that has national endorsement. And I will take to heart when I am hearing, but I will ask the paid supporters to please stop bullying and harassing the people that support me.
Thank you.
So this is a tough business, and facts are facts. As much as all the candidates up here want to be elected, there is math to this. And the math, unfortunately, in the United States, the math comes down to basically 4 areas. Who raises the most money, who's got the polling, who's got the endorsements, and who's got the followers. And I applaud Laura for taking the big step that she took to step out. I would tell you I would do the same thing. I would step out if I did not think I had a path towards victory. I would welcome that opportunity, frankly. If you don't have a path towards victory, why are you in this? Because you're not doing it for the greater good. And I think folks need to recognize that. For our campaign, and I'll be very brief, I'll just share with you the metrics. And these metrics are all a result of you and people like you supporting our campaign. So we've raised over $1.5 million. We've raised more money than any other candidate, including the incumbent. We have more cash on hand than any other challenger, as well as the incumbent. We have more followers than probably everybody up here combined when you add social media and volunteers and donors. We have more in-district donors than anybody else. We have 3 times as many labor endorsements as everybody up here behind me. And we have the entire congressional Democratic delegation attached to Orange County has solely endorsed our campaign. I don't think that could be any clearer as to who they want in Washington and who they don't want in Washington. So I would ask for your support because ultimately this comes down to name recognition. And as was pointed out, there's only one person in this race that has name recognition, and that's Dana Rohrabacher. And whoever has the ability to raise the money, get their name out there, and knock on doors is going to create that name recognition. And the last thing I'll talk about is the polling. We keep hearing about this one poll. Look, anybody can do a poll that makes them look good. That's what you do with polls. There's what's called the top line question. The top line question in a poll is simply, of these people, who would you vote for? And in that top line poll that has been cited numerous times up here, the top person was Rohrabacher at 35%, and there was 2 other people at 10%, and that was Laura and myself. And the reason Laura and I were there was because we've been doing this for over a year, busting our rear ends, getting out and doing what is required to win an election.
Thank you. Thank you.
And every one of these Democratic candidates said they would drop out if they did not have polling above 10%. They did not have polling above 10%, and I would encourage them to take the same and make the same decision Laura made.
Thank you. Okay, we need to move on. We've spent way too much time on this question. So when we ask the questions, can we please ask questions about issues and not about campaign strategy? And same with you, if we could stick to answering questions about the issues and not about campaign strategies. We can find the numbers online. We're going to be here all night if we don't answer the questions that people need to hear. They need to hear about the issues.
Is
Go
Dana
ahead, please.
Rohrabacher an issue?
I
think
yes, she's. He's,
I've never heard of her, Dana Rohrabacher. Educate me.
Okay, can we ask the next question, please?
No, what I'm saying is how are you going to educate the voters about Dana Rohrabacher?
Okay. Next question, please.
Buenas noches, everybody. My name is Victor Valladares, and I'm the president of the Chicano Latino Immigrant Democratic Club of Orange County. Out of all the questions that I've heard in debates, not just 48, 49, 39, 45, no one's talking about a very important issue that is dear to the immigrant communities. And this is H.R. 418. So this will be going out to the Democratic candidates. What will you do in October 1st, 2020 is the date that California will have to comply and come to compliance with the Federal Real ID Act of 2005. What will you do to secure and protect our undocumented folks under AB 60? Thank you.
All right, good question. Thank you. The mics are down there. You can just grab them.
All right, I'll take a start at it. Well, first, I want to say thank you to the Latina Chicano Immigrant Club for your recommendation for endorsement to the Democratic caucus. I received that endorsement and that recommendation, so thank you. I think what we need to do is recognize that this facet of our state and nation is a critical one. What we cannot do is ignore issues and target immigrants in our community and force issues of ID wherever they're stopped. That creates a police state in our country. Many people think that that creates a very safer nation, but it does not. What it does, it actually generates and promotes criminal activity. We have to stop acting. The Trump administration, we have to be clear, has to stop acting like we are now living in a police military state. We have to have respect for our immigrants. And as I said before, we need to ensure, how do we remedy this? That's one thing. But I think from a bigger picture, we have to recognize that we need a clean DACA bill that recognizes a pathway to citizenship and not forget the 11 million undocumented citizens in our country.
You know, I feel exactly the same way. I'm an immigrant from Canada, and I didn't have the issues of color. I wasn't a woman who has a harder time. That's very well documented. I wasn't someone that had no resources whatsoever. My family didn't have a cent. I grew up in poverty, actually. But I had people to call, and I had somebody that would jump in a car and come and get me if I was sitting homeless. You know, I wasn't LGBTQ, and so I didn't have those extra difficulties. You know, we need a very clean pathway. We can't be forcing these individuals to hide. And this is an issue that I got into fairly heavily due to something I said once, that we should collect data on individuals in order to, I'm a scientist. You got to forgive me for wanting to collect data all the time. But I wanted to collect data on these individuals so that we could actually show undeniably their contributions to our society. But a couple of young immigrants themselves came up to me and said, you know, Dr. Keirstead, that actually poses a problem because look at DACA children who have their parents are at risk because they know their home address. And those individuals now with an expired program are also at risk because they gave away their home address and now they are being completely turned on by the very government that they had cherished and looked up to. So I learned and I changed my tune entirely, that I wish we could help those individuals by keeping track of the data that they generated, but we can't yet. So we have to take a step back from that and provide a very clean pathway to citizenship. So I am very staunch supporter of issuing visas in the permanent, getting rid of the 3 and the 10 bar. I'm also a very strong proponent of granting citizenship and a right to faster visas for individuals that have come here under education. They're clearly contributors to our society. That's a very easy thing to do. And these family waiting lists cannot happen. We need to expand the entrance criteria for those individuals.
Thank you.
Hey, Victor, I'm going to try and answer your question very quickly. The purpose of that law is to force people into the shadows. It will have huge impact on their ability to get jobs, hold jobs, to even travel, to get on an airplane, to be able to purchase a house. And the purpose has to be stopped. And the best way we can stop that is flipping the House in 2018, the Senate in 2018, and the White House in 2020. This is nothing more than the alt-right and Trump's administration trying to force those folks that are in our communities out of the ability to carry on their lives in a respectful way and be a part of the fabric of our community. I'll fight against it best I can.
Thank you.
Quickly, one of the things we know about forced IDs when it comes to important civic activities like voting is that it automatically suppresses participation. This is an automatic lockout of people of our system. So what we have to remember is when we think about shoring up our security and making sure that citizens are able to participate, doing things like this is a deliberate attack on those who are already trying to integrate into society, who already have so many challenges getting a job and making a living and caring for their family. What we do not need to do is double that burden by making them not only feel unwelcome, but to literally lock them out, and it is wrong. What we instead should do is look at ways in which we can integrate people more effectively so that they can participate more fully. Because the one thing we know about America is that everyone has the right to fulfill their greatest potential, to be their greatest potential. And that is what we should remember when we're talking about laws for our citizens. And in the meanwhile, we should protect our own elections.
Thank you. May I have the next question, please?
My name is Megan. I know some of you are new to me. My name is Megan Morales. I'm a homeowner here in Costa Mesa. I'm a proud Bernie supporter. I actually voted for him in the primary. I don't know if you know, Costa Mesa actually went for Bernie in the primary. Little fun fact for you there. I'm not going to ask about climate change. I'm not going to ask about immigrants. I'm not going to ask about health care. I feel like we've talked a lot about those things in other areas. I'm going to turn 30 this year. I have an uncle who's about to die from complications of the Vietnam War. I have another uncle who died from the complications of the Kuwait War. I have lots of friends who died in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm hearing the drumbeats of war. I cannot believe we are accepting this. Even in the Democratic Party, it's embarrassing. My question, I have this on live and I'm not even aiming it. My question for you all is, what are you going to do to prevent another Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Honduras, Iran, all the other places that we have torn apart and wasted our money on, and lives on, and time on? This is for all of you, frankly.
Yep. Great question. Thank you so much.
I've got some flyers out there, and I point this out because the very first issue that I've got on top of that flyer is that we need to end unnecessary, failed global warfare, particularly when you look at an example like Afghanistan. We've been in Afghanistan for over half of my life. That is outrageous and utterly ridiculous. We have no clear objectives. We have no purpose to be there. It's a huge waste of not only American lives, but it's also a massive waste of American taxpayer dollars. I have made a commitment that one of the top priorities of mine would be to ensure that we can do all that we can to end global warfare. And each and every year, there is a piece of legislation that gets passed through the House and the Senate, the National, it's escaping me right now, the National Something Authorization Act, that in essence funds global warfare. And you have Democrats and Republicans that vote for that each and every year. This is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and it's something where we need to continue to spread the message. You know, we do talk a lot about healthcare and guns, but you know, that example of Afghanistan, we've been in Afghanistan for 17 years. This is outrageous, it's madness, and it has to stop.
If I can just amend it really quick. what else, in addition to my question, what else are you going to do to perhaps join Bernie Sanders and his bill to stop our assistance in the humanitarian crisis in the Yemen war right now with Saudi Arabia?
Excellent question. So let's just take a real quick recount of what happens war-wise since what's happened war-wise since Trump took office. So Afghanistan, we have 4,000 more troops and 3 times the number of bombs that have been dropped. In Syria, we had 94 troops there in 2016. Now we have 1,720. In Yemen, we've tripled the fuel supplies and grossly inflated our presence there. And in Somalia, we have 3 times the number of soldiers and 3 times the number of bombs having been dropped. In North Korea, we no longer have an undersecretary for arms control. We don't have one. We no longer have an ambassador to Southern Korea, which is the most obvious middle person to be dealing with North Korea because they are talking. So we are on a pathway of escalation. It is, don't think anything else. It is a pathway of escalation, and we've got to stop it. All of those things have been put forward by President Trump. We have generals, we have more generals per capita of any first world nation by an order of, I forget if it's 3 or 5, than any other nation. We have a glut of generals. We have brought the military nail down from about $700 to $70, but it's still way too damn high. We're giving contracts away to militia and those types of contractors to supply militia and our military that is still outrageous and it's antiquated. The system has to change. Tacking on military spending bills to healthcare bills and to budgets, we cannot allow that, and that is the job of the House, and that is my job if I take office. Thank you.
It's like a wrap. Do you mind if I go real fast? I'll go real quick. So what I won't do is repeat what everyone said, because I think we'll all save ourselves some time. So I agree with making sure that we actually authorize the use of military force, which I think Adam Schiff has proposed, that I think is a good thing for us to do. What it does require us to do, which frankly we have not done, which is alarming, is that Congress has to be notified when ground troops are introduced into any conflict. So we need to be sure that we all don't turn on the TV one day and say, what are we doing in Niger, and why are those people there, and why are we fighting? It's out of control, and there needs to be visibility. I also agree with Ted Lieu's legislation that says we need congressional approval for the use of nuclear weapons. That needs to happen. But what I'd like to do is provide another lens on the conflicts and the toll that it's taking on all of us. Because frankly, we are in the longest standing war in our nation's history. Similar to what Brandon said, we went to war when I was a sophomore in college, just to give you some context of how long we have been there. I have not known an adult year of my life where we have not been at war. The challenge is, nothing about how we treat veterans has changed. John, thank you for your service, by the way. Appreciate that. Let's talk Costa Mesa. We're all here. 20% of the homeless population in Costa Mesa are veterans. Why is this happening? Well, we have a VA that is broken. We have transition care. Do you know we are sending people for multiple tours in these conflicts, yet we have not changed how we transition them back to civilian life. We don't give them the adequate amount of time to establish roots, to pick out housing, to find a job. We give them 5 days after years of service to sort all of those things out, and that is what has to change. That is one of my principal issues, is we need veterans transition services similar to what I did numerous different times, where I helped an Orange County company partner with the U.S. Army to guarantee job interviews for automotive technicians across the country for people who were enlisted that serviced tanks, Hummers, helicopters, and planes. Because it's not just a government role, it is a community role, it is a business role. And we all need to do a whole lot better.
Thank you.
First, I'm sorry, very sorry for your loss. I have a quagmire. I am a national security expert, and I've spent a lot of time studying war, from wars with chariots to global thermonuclear war. And I can tell you, after studying war, the only way to win war is not to engage in it. I engaged in an assignment once aboard the USS Alexandria, a Los Angeles-class nuclear submarine. And to see the young sailors who were on that sub going through that drill, imagining, God forbid, should that real time come. And I thought to myself, what are we going to do to prevent this drill from being real? And to answer your question, what we have to do as leaders is elect leadership that we can trust. How many of you fear the tweets coming out from the White House playing nuclear war games against North Korea? We need to ensure that we have leadership that we can trust with the nuclear codes. We have to ensure that we have leadership that know that diplomacy first has to be our country's policy. Because when we engage in war, as John F. Kennedy would say, we will all lose. Before I close, I will want to say that what we need to do is also, we need to treat our veterans like the heroes that they are. Veterans cannot be sleeping in the streets when they've been facing bullets overseas. We need to give our veterans health care, mental care. We need to give them on-the-job training so when they come back after they've risked their lives for our country, they have a way to come back. It is our duty as leaders, our duties as Americans to remember them. Thank you.
How to avoid war. Diplomacy, 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 economics. I'm going to go against the grain in the left on the room here. TPP. We can work out the details from a manufacturing perspective, but if you don't create an alliance in the South China Sea, we're going to have problems, okay? So when you have Vietnam, the Philippines, and Australia on your side, you get the exact same buffer that we have in the West, which is NATO, right? Why doesn't Russia mess with us? Why is Vladimir very upset? Because we have a whole bunch of economic allies in between us and them. That's how you avoid war. You have economic allies. North Korea goes through China. That's how you solve North Korea. They get their economic support from China. They're also selling ICBM or buying ICBM specs from the Russians, but that's separate. How do you fix Syria? On the eastern side is Russia, so good luck. The western side is Jordan and a bunch of Middle Eastern countries we can work with. How do you fix Russia economically and avoid war there? They are a $1.2 trillion economy. We are a $20 trillion economy. Russia can be starved economically, and as soon as their oligarchs are exposed for what they are, they will be gone and they'll have a new regime. They have security status on the UN Council where they can veto anything as one of the 5 permanent members. You have to do diplomacy around the world to avoid hot conflicts. In Yemen, that is a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We cannot solve that, but what we can do in Congress is cancel the blank check that we wrote them. Bipartisan, Obama to Trump administrations, we gave the Saudis $110 billion of weapons. The Saudis did 9/11. The Saudis did 9/11. And we gave them a blank check for $110 billion worth of weapons. Do they have our best interests at heart? Do we need their oil? No. What the f are we doing?
Hi. I'm so sorry about your family.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Hey, let me clear up a couple things. Sorry. Let me clear up a couple things. First, as far as the troop levels go in both Iraq and in Afghanistan, excuse me, and in Syria, the reason for that is we're trying to put more forces on the ground so we can get this thing over with. And the only way we're going to get out of there is to get the government enough space and time so that they can get on their feet and get out. That's the only reason why we're doing it. Nobody wants to be there anymore. If you've ever been to the Middle East, it's not a fun place to be. Now, as far as Iraq goes, why did we go into Iraq? I was the ground operations officer for the Coalition Joint Task Force in Kuwait City in the 90s. And we were running Operation Southern Watch and trying to keep air superiority over Iraq. And we spent a lot of time in the air and on the ground making sure that the Iraqis didn't have any weapons of mass destruction and that they didn't have any anti-air weapon systems. So we ran a lot of sorties off of aircraft carriers and out of Saudi Arabia in order to make that happen. I can tell you, having been on the Kuwait border, looked over and seen the other side, and having visited with the Kuwaiti military and listened to the war atrocities that occurred during the occupation of Kuwait during Desert Shield, I can tell you that Kuwait was a very bad actor, and Saddam needed to go at some point. I think that the war was rushed. We didn't need to go win when we needed it. It took our eyes off of Afghanistan, and that's probably why we're still there today. I'd also tell you that when we went into the sequestration in 2011, we lost $400 billion out of defense spending, and it created such a problem in trying to get soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines trained and get them into theater that it created even more problems. So the reason why we see a $716 billion defense budget this year is because at the beginning of 2007, like in January, 1 out of every 4 FA-18s in the Navy and the Marine Corps could fly. Everything else was on the ground. And we were actually taking parts out of the downed aircraft in order to keep the one going. So that's the reason why we're spending all that money today, because we've got to rebuild and we've got to get ready, because who knows where the next war is going to be. I can promise you that it's not going to be Iraq. I'm sorry, it's not going to be Iran. It's not going to be North Korea. The issues are too great. It's just, there's no good military solution in either one of those. I've seen the war plans on Iraq. I can tell you it's long, it's brutal, and it's no place that we want to go. So, as everyone has said here, on repeated occasions, diplomacy is always the best answer. The reason why when we talk about military forces, I firmly believe in forward presence. I spent 2.5 years floating in the Mediterranean as part of the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit. So during that time, we hit every major country along the Mediterranean coast, and then also I had the chance to go down. We had 2 civil wars in Liberia and Central Africa, and I evacuated the American Embassy out of Central African Republic and out of Monrovia, Liberia. So it's the only reason why that happens is when you have Marines, sailors, airmen, forward deployed, and able to help when need be. We ended up getting 190 Americans out of Central Africa. Who the heck knew that there was 190 Americans in Central Africa? But most of them were Job Corps folks, and I'm sorry, not Job Corps. AmeriCorps and Peace Corps. Excuse me. Thank you. You would never think that a Peace Corps guy would be so happy to see a Marine in his entire life, but they were just ecstatic. So we have to have people forward. That costs money. I realize that, but it helps us. Some of the best ambassadors we have in this country are the young soldiers and sailors that are out there forward deployed. They are the ones that can really make a change for the country.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next question, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for your question. So I agree with many of my colleagues up here that the best way to avoid war is to prevent war through diplomatic and economic means. I agree with that. And in addition, I would say we have to prevent war by looking at the threats that are currently in play and have a strategy on how to counter them. Many people in this room are aware that dozens by now of our federal agencies have been hacked. Last year, 100 different nuclear and power systems were hacked by the Russians. Many of our national grid systems are vulnerable. And if you think about large-scale infrastructure projects, including water, these are also plants that have been hacked. The next war could very well be on American soil, and we've done nothing to prevent the vulnerabilities that are currently being exploited by hostile foreign powers. When you combine that with the saber rattling that's happening with North Korea, where yes, we don't have the right leadership in place. Oh, and by the way, we have no leaders in the State Department. There is no diplomacy to be done when the agents of diplomacy are non-existent. There is a vacuum of leadership. When we look at North Korea, I want to be really clear. They are dealing with economic sanctions, famine, and a hostile dictatorship. They are looking for a way to sell their weapons to the world. What they're doing by demonstrating with their nuclear weapons and their ICBM potential, or intercontinental ballistic missile potential, is that they are now a formidable nuclear power that can arm rogue states and hostile actors. That's their whole strategy. And by giving them a stage, a platform, offering a summit with North Korea, Trump is actually validating this and putting them up on stage as the best supplier to the world's conflicts for nuclear arms. They've already sold chemical weapons to Syria. So we know these things are happening, and we're taking the wrong approach. When it comes to North Korea, we should work through and with China to prevent this. We should, of course, have an ambassador, and we should work with our allies who know the region, Japan, Korea, and many others with whom we've had decades-long alliances. My brother served in Iraq 2 tours, and my cousin carried the nuclear football for Joe Biden. He was his chief military aide. When my cousin told me his fears about Trump in power, it was the fear that he can't be trusted with the nuclear codes. And when my brother came back from Iraq, we didn't take care of him. So it's not just about preventing war for war's sake, it's also cleaning up the messes that we make with war. And we haven't done that at all either. And that's in the countries that we work in, and that's the people who come home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Martin, have you said something? Well, you're a progressive Republican. I would like to hear your opinion, too.
Hello? The old, let's turn the Republicans' mic off trick. Yeah, I just want to say quickly that propaganda is a form of warfare. It's actually a really old form of warfare. It's been used for centuries. The Russians have utilized propaganda for a very long time. So what we just experienced in 2016 was not anything new. In fact, some of the wars that Russia endeavored in, Crimea, for example, started because Russia threw propaganda into the country, into the opposing factions there, and then went in militarily to solve the problem. Putin obviously worked for the KGB. He knows exactly what he's doing. And having, again, just been in New York at Putin conference and having heard from the world's leading experts on these issues and having meetings with some of them, there is no possible way to overestimate the threat that is happening right now in this nation. Because what does war mean? War just means to weaken, right? And what Russia is doing is incredibly deliberate, but not only deliberate, you know, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we could see the missiles, right? We knew there were missiles there. You saw 13 Days, maybe, the film. Of course, we can't see cyber attacks, and Rachel knows a lot about these things. And so we all are in agreement that Russia hacked the elections, but what's scary is we have a commander-in-chief that is doing nothing and has said nothing, as Dan Coates said, to deploy our agencies to even fight it. And what I would say to you, how many of you have a Republican brother, sister, child, mother, father, uncle, something, right? What we need to do, you know, because ultimately all these issues that we're talking about are great and important, but, you know, the problem in our country isn't the issues. The problem in our country, the problems are solved relating with each other, right? The issues are the issues, they're important. But what happens when we go home and we interact with the person on the other side is to a large extent how problems are solved in this nation, in community, right? And so I would just say we have to find a way to have civil dialogue with those on the other side. It's easy to go on Facebook, it's easy to go on Twitter. I'm guilty of it myself. But we have to be able to interact with our political opponents. That is the only way we're going to solve. I mean, we can only do so much up here, but at the end of the day, every one of you Democrats are friends with multiple Republicans. And we have to find a way with the enemy to engage to solve these problems. Thanks.
Thank you. So we're running out of time, so I'm going to allow one more question, and then you will all have a chance to have closing statements. Next question, please.
Hi, my name's Rick Huffman. I'm a local Costa Mesa resident, and I'm active in civic affairs in the city. And I've met Mr. Siddiqui and Mr. Rouda at our local city council meeting, in fact. And so I want to change the subject a little bit. Could you talk about local 48th issues a little bit? I know the national issues are important, and as a 70-year-old voter, of course, I'm assuming you're going to support Medicare, Social Security, and Medicare for all, maybe health care for all. But anyway, single-payer health care. But anyway, on the local issues, maybe something like the homeless issue in Orange County. Maybe your thoughts, a few of you, on that. And can I request that you start with Harry Rouda, because I met him, and I'd like, and I know he's
okay.
local.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And then everybody else can talk about it.
Is this one working? Great. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up local issues, because there's a direct correlation between the fact that we have a very broken healthcare system here in the United States and 30 million Americans who do not have healthcare insurance. It is the leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States and a leading cause of homelessness. In addition, so much of the homelessness that we experience here in our communities, as well as across California and the United States, is driven in large part by the fact we do not have adequate health care. In addition, sober homes are tied to this same issue. And we have, I think in Costa Mesa, somewhere around, Katrina will probably correct me if I get it wrong, but I know it's around 150 sober homes just in Costa Mesa. More than that, I'm getting a thumbs up. And listen, sober homes do play a very important part in our community in helping those that have addictions overcome those addictions, get back into society, and be good citizens again in society. However, under the ACA, the rules are being abused, and we have, for lack of a better term, fly-by-night sober homes that are attracting people to this area, taking 6 months of benefits from them, and not providing the benefits they need, the help they need to allow them to get back into the community, get back on their feet. And at the end of 6 months, they just end up on the street. Homelessness is a huge issue, and it's an important issue to me and my wife. My wife and I, in our early 20s, my wife was very moved by an article in the New Yorker magazine about the plight of homeless families. Homeless families at that time, after exhausting all of their savings, losing their home, losing any potential vouchers in hotels and churches and so on, living in their car, and then finally making the very difficult decision to go to a homeless shelter. At that point, the women and the young children were sent to the women's shelter, and the men and the older boys were sent to the men's shelter. So the only thing they have left at that point in their life is each other, and here we are splitting them up and sending them into a very, very difficult environments. So my wife decided right then and there, we are going to build a shelter for homeless families. And I'm proud of the fact we did that. We, in our early 20s, built a shelter for homeless families. And that issue is here more prominent than ever. And we need county supervisors who are willing to take the funds that have been dedicated to this issue and have a well thought out, passionate response to the homelessness issue that we have here. And I'm not seeing that. I don't see setting up tent cities and parks in certain communities as the way to go. We need long-term housing. We need medical protections for these individuals, both mental and physical medical needs being met. We need to get them back into society, back on their feet. And if we don't do that, this problem is going to continue to exacerbate. And there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And unfortunately, our Republican leaders in this district, in my opinion, are not doing it the correct way. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the only other issue is the planes. We've got to address the planes. The loud planes flying over. It's an issue both here, and LAX has actually moved some of their flight patterns over our district as well.
Thank you. This is a threefer, so I'm going to go fast. Homelessness, you mentioned healthcare, and local issue that we get to pick, wild card. Homelessness covers a few different things that we're talking about, right? Why are people homeless? A variety of reasons. Opioid epidemic, veterans, and a rigged economy, and mental health. So you hear a lot about healthcare and how everybody wants to do healthcare, but I've been to everybody's website, and very few people actually have a plan. This is supposed to be an issues-based conversation. Go to our website, wehavethingstodo.com, and I will tell you exactly how to pass SB 562 here in California. Use it as a lynchboard. We're 40 million people in a country of 330. When our single payer works, the rest of the country will have to take notice. That's how states' rights work. We have little incubators that work and don't work. Kansas's economy didn't work. Let's not do trickle-down economics. Sorry. So the homelessness problem, you pass healthcare, there's part of the problem, right? Opioids, homelessness, mental health, excuse me. Opioid epidemic, also on the website, very personal for me. You also mentioned Medicare, Medicaid, right? How many baby boomers have long-term care insurance already? All right, good, you're the only ones that are gonna get it. Because my world, the investment world, stopped offering it because you are no longer profitable. When you are old and sick, you are not profitable. So baby boomers, watch out, because they are gonna continue to try to cut your Medicare, your Medicaid, and your Social Security. That's why they just passed a $1.5 trillion tax cut, and they're gonna come after entitlements next. Boomers, you paid for those. Those are not entitlements. This is another example of where the Democrats lose the narrative on economics, right? My wild card, local issue. How many people here live inside the 48th? Congratulations, you all live within 50 miles of San Onofre. We are burying 3.6 million pounds of nuclear waste in the sand 104 feet from the beach. It's in 5/8 inch thick steel that cannot be inspected and cannot be fixed if it leaks. When Fukushima had a storm that blew up their nuclear reactor, they evacuated a 50-mile radius. That is the US preferred mandatory evacuation zone, 50 miles. Doesn't matter if you're homeless or have a home or how much your house cost if you have a nuclear waste dump in the backyard. Camp Pendleton would be gone. 8.5 million people would need to move. Congress has $32 billion set aside for this. Obama cut off the tax that funded this fund, and they now have $32 billion. Yucca Mountain, 2 temporary sites in West Texas or New Mexico. There are a variety of issues and places that we could take this, throw it on a train, and get it out of Southern California, because the next storm, sea level rise, Russia, North Korea, flip the map around, right? We're the ones that share an ocean line with North Korea and Russia, not the East Coast, okay? So San Onofre is a big one for me. The money's there, but the will to do something isn't.
Thank you.
Okay, I certainly I am a Medicare for all. First and foremost, healthcare it's a right. It's not a privilege. We've got to make sure that that comes down from the state to our district, from the Congress to our district. Homelessness is just a rampant problem, as we all know. We have to face the reality here that we are growing by 200,000 homes per year, and we are 3.4 million homes behind. That is a heck of a problem to fix in order to put homeless people into homes. So that ends up being a local council issue. So as a congressman, I have learnt that we need to be standing beside local council members. We need to be standing beside mayors in order to help them get these measures passed, because they are local issues. It's the not in my backyard type of mentality that we can't be tolerating. We have to find these solutions and educate individuals of their severity. I took my little 8-year-old boy to Tent City, and he didn't know what we were doing on that Saturday, but we just showed up, my wife and I, and we walked through there. And, you know, within a week, I was, you know, working very, very closely with a coalition to end homelessness, endorsed thereafter. I was just invited on to the Leadership Council of the United Way, working there. Was at a homemade event last night or the night before. And I'm learning a lot about homelessness. And yes, it has a lot to do with sober living centers, which are, and that's in my wheelhouse. These centers are, frankly, most of them operating under criminal conditions where they're actually using rehabilitated individuals in order to nurse and doctor the patients. Then after the insurance is out, they're dumping it. I'm investigating a legal method of tying that to human trafficking. The human trafficking laws used to only be smuggling people across the border. Then they were expanded for sexual abuse. Then they were expanded for child sexual abuse. Human trafficking laws apply to sober living centers. And I'm investigating a pathway of tying those centers, regulating them through human trafficking, because it is the abuse of an individual as a result of monetary gain, which is human trafficking. So that is a path forward that I can do as a congressman, and I am working with individuals to push that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then one thing that we can do in Congress on the environment that affects the 48th is restore the federal restrictions on offshore oil rigs that was lifted and voted for by Rohrabacher. Why would a congressman do that to his constituents? It's ridiculous. And then, of course, recommissioning the use of satellites for early warning weather systems here on our coastal district. Education would be my third, because it affects this group so deeply in the 48th, where we have a high education level. And with $1.4 trillion of debt, we've got to do something about that. As a professor, I have been living that.
Thank you. Omar?
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. The 5 issues that I see, number 1, a big local threat is Dana Rohrabacher. Number 2, I would say, obviously, is homelessness. I spoke with Muhammad Ali of the Orange County Poverty Alliance earlier today, and his major concern was the sheer amount of money that we have that's tied up that's not helping the homeless. Number 3, offshore oil drilling and environmental protection. Dana Rohrabacher said recently that, offshore oil drilling isn't an issue because the fish, he went scuba diving, and the fish are coming to the platform, and therefore it's friendly for the environment, and therefore it's friendly for the fish. Something silly like this. Another major issue, which is affecting all of our teachers and students every day who cannot focus on what tomorrow is going to be. Teachers like Shayna Lathas, who's running for Huntington Beach City Council, by the way. Teachers who have to go to school not knowing if there's going to be violence at their school. Gun control is a national and a major local issue. And last but not least, John Wayne Airport and the airport noise is affecting our 48th district as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel?
I won't do all 3. I'll go very quickly. So on the homeless issue, one of the areas that we need to remember is that we actually had a plan in Orange County, and it was approved. But the OC Board of Supervisors doesn't have the political will or interest in implementing it. And in the last few weeks, there have been a courtroom with an amazing judge who's actually took them to task and had them come forward to commit to finally doing something that they already had planned for, and $700 million from the federal government that they hadn't used. So that's an easy answer. Use the money that you've already been allocated, follow the plan that's already been mapped out, and that is actually a very sound plan. And by the way, now we're finally breaking ground on our first mental health institution to address issues that include homelessness. But if you really want to get at what creates homelessness, you have to look at the root causes, which I agree, addiction, mental health, veterans who have not been taken care of by this country, and domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is also a big cause of homelessness. And right now, the answer to that is to further criminalize the homeless by arresting them, from these encampments. And this is not a criminal issue. This is a social issue. So when we're putting homeless people into hospitals and into jails, we're only exacerbating the problem. What they need is care and treatment, and we're not addressing the root cause. Affordability is another issue. There was a study that was done that showed that every 5% increase in the housing cost here creates 1,000 more homeless people. I'm sure we all know that our housing has gone up by about 5% or more, at least. So again, affordable housing units and their availability are super important. Thank you. I do want to just touch on San Onofre because this is also something that is complicated, but because it's a federal jurisdiction issue, this is the right group of people to be asking about it. One of my friends was the lead nuclear engineer in Fukushima and was sent in after the crisis. He's alive, everything's fine. But I asked him about San Onofre, and it's ridiculous. The technology that they're using is decades behind. Germany and Japan have 10 millimeter thick tubes, not 3/8. Well, okay, 3/8, 5/8, okay, I thought it was 3/8. And the issue, though, is that they're storing all of it together. They're storing spent fuel as well as nuclear waste together. And there's actually ways that by decoupling them, you have fewer waste to dispose of. And of course, burying it in the sand on the shore is not the right answer, but the canisters have been built so that they're incompatible with railroad containers and other things that would be used to transport them. So there's a lot of problems with this. They can't be inspected. They are not built to withstand sea level exposure and salt water and salt air exposure. And they're following a technology that's decades old. So there's a lot of problems here that are literally sitting right at our coast that are nuclear in nature and that are of the scale of a Fukushima. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll echo everyone's comments and then just add one. Anyone who says that they're going to advocate for a $15 minimum wage is missing the point for this district. $15 as a minimum wage isn't going to cut it. I don't know where you're living, but it's not going to cut it. To rent a one-bedroom apartment in Orange County, you have to make $24 an hour. So we can make it $20 an hour. It's still not going to matter. The fact of the matter is we have 25% of the children in this district living in a family that is below the poverty line. That's not okay for us. Because what that leads to is that leads to financial stress at home, which trickles down to the child, which then filters down to depression, anxiety, fear, just uneasiness in the classroom. It goes all the way through our communities. What we need to be doing is we need to have job training programs that actually make sense. Because right now, if you look at the federal job training programs, what they do is they point you to a website and show you all the 2- and 4-year degrees that you can go get full-time. How many of you that have a family to take care of are ready to quit your job, take on $100,000 of student loan debt, and go get retrained so that you can make $25,000 a year more? Doesn't make sense. We need to bring actual, practical, technological-driven, on-demand training to ensure that we can have people reach even higher than they are right now. The good news is that the opportunity is waiting. What we don't talk about enough is the fact out of 8 jobs that are posted in Orange County that are mid-skill level. So you're talking about project management, you're talking about basic high school plus certifications. Only 3 out of 8 are filled. We have a skills gap in this county. And we have a fundamental opportunity to reach to our neighbors and our friends and our family members and help them find a way to make more and actually keep up with the cost of living to live here. But instead, we're pointing to a 4-year university and telling them to take on debt. We need to think smarter about training. We need to think smarter about vocations and trade. We need to rethink job training altogether, and that would be a top priority for me in Congress.
Thank you. Okay, so now I just want to hear the final statements, and I would also like to know what is the one issue that you will aggressively tackle as a candidate if you were to win the seat?
All right, those are synonymous. This is good. Closing thoughts are the economy is rigged, okay, because it is. I work for an investment firm. We make money out of money. And I can tell you that the economy is designed for the people that do that, right? It's not designed for you. We're going to see a massive windfall with the baby boomers as they retire. And the millennials already have a massive windfall because we have seen stagnant wages for 30 years and we're saddled with debt. So what are we going to do to grow the economy? What are we going to do to help people with their debt? Because you hear a lot about the federal debt at 20 trillion. The private debt, those monthly bills that you get, your car insurance, right? Your car payment, your credit cards, your health insurance, your mortgage, 14 trillion in debt that we all owe. 14 trillion. 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Median household income in this country is $60,000. Here in California, it's 70. How far does 70 grand get you in the 48th? We need people that are going to unrig the economy. If you're going to vote for establishment politicians with hundreds of thousands of dollars pre-selected by the party with favors owed to the people that gave them the hundreds of thousands of dollars, do not expect things to change. You can play team red, you can play team blue. I've been team blue my whole life. But this is not working. If we want to talk together, if we want to solve things, let's actually focus on some issues and stop playing the other guy. Have you seen the other guy? Look at the other guy. Have you seen the other guy? The other guy's horrible. All right, when your mortgage changes hands, how many people have started paying one bank and then your mortgage changes hands and you pay a different bank? When your mortgage changed hands, do you think it changed for the same value? Why did one company give it to another company? Why are you paying a different company, right? Most of the time, when your debt changes hands, it changes hands for less than what you owe, right? John Oliver did an amazing piece on this a couple seasons ago. Go to his website on the old interwebs there, HBO. They created a collections agency in Texas. They bought $15 million worth of healthcare debt from private citizens. Anybody know how much they spent? 60 grand. In this world, in my world, in the institutional investment space, we can buy debt for pennies on the dollar. It's your debt, and then we're going to come after you in collections. Not my company, but the apparatus as a whole, right? Why is this happening? Why are you still paying the full value of your loan or your mortgage when it's not being held at that amount by the companies that you're paying it to? So here's what we do. Day one legislation. Anytime your debt changes hands, your auto loan, your credit card, your mortgage, your healthcare debt, you get a notice in the mail telling you who to pay next. That already happens, right? All we're going to do is require by law that they tell you how much money changed hands and give you 90 days to match it. I went to law school for a couple years, took a year off, and never went back. So I got all the debt and none of the degree. So I've got about 120 grand in debt still, even though I have a good job, right, in Southern California. I could go into the Teachers Credit Union, thanks to my third-generation public school wife, and get a $30,000 loan at 4%, 5%. I'm currently paying 120 grand on 8%. It's federally capped at 8%. Thanks, Uncle Sam. What are interest rates right now? Why am I still paying 8%? 787, if we really want to be specific. Sending you a notice in the mail and giving you 90 days to buy your own debt back. There's no taxes. There's no subsidies. There's no spending. But no one has the political will to give you access to these kind of tricks and tools. They don't have the will, or they don't know, or they don't care, because the powers that be are making money off you. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone, for coming out tonight. I want to spend my time talking a little bit about the local homeless issue, and there is really something that we can do at the federal level to address this. Some of my competition here danced around it, but I want to say it a little bit more boldly. We need to end the war on drugs. Jeff Sessions is one of the top threats to us as a country. He is one of the top threats to our freedom. So that's something that we need to go after aggressively. And I want you all to go home tonight, and I want you to research what was done in Portugal when they ended their war on drugs. They had a tremendous amount of success, and in turn, the results that they've seen have been astounding. So if you're not familiar with what's been going on in Portugal over the past couple of decades, go home, Google that, read up, because that's really a model that I feel like we can follow and we can have a ton of success with in the United States. So I already spoke a little bit about immigration. I spoke about ending wars. You know, for those of you that have been to a town hall, you know that I always like to end by talking a little bit about respect and humility. You know, I do truly believe that we all have much more in common than we disagree on. So that's something that I am really striving to bring back to politics. You know, I think that there's a lot where it doesn't matter where you land on the political spectrum, there is a lot that we can make progress on when we work together. And I truly believe that if we work together on issues where we see eye to eye, then when we move on to the more difficult issues where we maybe don't see eye to eye, that becomes a lot easier for everyone. So it's my commitment from here on out to conduct myself with respect and humility, and more importantly, it's my commitment to listen to your voice. And I walk the walk with this. I held a town hall last month to discuss the Second Amendment and gun violence. And I intentionally invited Democrats. And a couple of Democrats came. And if you're familiar with where libertarians sit on the spectrum of the Second Amendment, we're strong supporters of the Second Amendment. But I welcomed the tough questions. And I welcome the tough questions. And when you can answer them respectfully and with humility, you can have a conversation and you can start to move things forward. So that's the way that I always like to end my statement to you all. I hope you all can take those words to heart and begin to advocate for some of that yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, everybody's leaving, so I'm gonna be very, very brief. We talked about a lot of key issues, and a lot of my priorities fall there. I think the one thing that I will close with, and I don't remember your name, I'm so sorry, Kathleen. I want to thank you for your question, and I want to thank you for your openness to hearing our responses. And what I will definitely say, and I say this a lot, this district will not flip because other people say that it should. It's not going to do it by itself. We can't just assume that because some political report says that it's a flip district now, that it's just going to happen. We have to think expansively. We have to get out and register people to vote. We have to energize and inspire every single person in this district, not just the people who are registered Democrats, not just the people who live close by to us. We have to go and walk door to door. It's going to take courage. It's going to take passion. It's going to take strength. And it's going to take a commitment like nothing any of us have felt before. We all have to be willing to do it. I'm willing to do it. There is nothing more humbling than someone slamming the door in your face and shooing you away because you're a Democrat. It's very humbling. Something was wrong with my file, or so they moved. I don't know what it was. We can do this. We can do this, but we have to empower new types of people to not only help us get there, but to lead us there. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Well, I know very few of you will vote for me because I'm one of them. And I understand that. And I just want to say that I don't believe, one of the reasons I remain in the Republican Party is because in my core, you know, I've spent most of my life working as a social entrepreneur. I've helped homeless agencies. I've worked for homeless agencies. I have videos on my website of me talking about DACA kids and how we should accept them. I have videos on my website talking about homelessness. I have videos on my website lambasting the Republicans for their NRA ties. I took the pledge, not accepting any money. And so what I want to do is I have a vision to reform the Republican Party. One party should not have a monopoly on issues of human rights and civil rights in social justice, even if it's just good PR that the Democrats have, and we know it's more than that. Issues of human dignity should not be the domain of one party. And I'm concerned that it has gone that way. And I'm concerned that people like Donald Trump and Dana Rohrabacher have brought it about. So I'm the raging centrist Republican in this race. And every one of you in this district probably have 5, 10, 20 Republican friends. And they're not going to vote as Democrats. So you can help me. Have them visit my website. I'm strong on national defense. They're going to like that. It's the first thing on my issues page. But I'm serious. Every one of you know Republicans. Scott Baugh and Dana Rohrabacher are not my style of Republicans. But I'm someone that I think all of you could respect. Tell your friends about me. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so very much for coming out tonight. It's honestly the fuel for everyone up here. I know it. I think it's really important that you know what you get with me. You know, I grew up on a farm in very poor conditions, okay? Grow your own food kind of poor conditions. I spent half of my childhood with a single mom. I'm one of 6 kids. I went to university because the government helped me go to university. I went to England to further my education because the government paid for that. I took a professorship for 15 years and you all paid for my salary. You know, I'm one of 6 kids and me and one other individual made money in our family and we support the rest of our family. So I want you to know that about me and what you get with me. I came from that. I came through a union family with 2 brothers that started swinging hammers at 17. One joined a union and one didn't. And guess who's got the pension and the good health and the white hat and doing great in his late 50s? And guess who's got brachial plexus injuries and is still swinging a hammer at 59 with no pension, and I'm supporting that individual. So I know where I've come from, and this is what I've done. You know, I'm on a board that fixes children's faces with reconstructive surgery. The same place fixes people's faces for reconstructive surgery for undocumented immigrants, and I'm okay with that. I think that's fantastic. My father and I started a clinic in Africa, and we've been running it for about 15 years. We started a university in Africa, and we've been running that for about a decade. I volunteered, and I am one of the lead scientists on the national mass tort for opiates. This is the largest mass tort in the world because I see the trickle down of this and where my talents can be used. So I have gathered experts from all over the world. I'm a neuroscientist. Opiates affect the brain. That's how the fit is there. And I can gather these individuals and bring them together to fight Big Pharma. I have never taken money from Big Pharma. I have fought Big Pharma my entire career. I have dedicated my life to very, very hard fights. I developed a treatment for spinal cord injury with my team that has now restored full arm movement to every one of the recipients of that treatment. We have developed a cancer treatment with a 72% survival rate. We have done rheumatoid arthritis and now ulcerative colitis. I am dedicated to helping people, and that's all I have ever done. And now I'm dedicating myself to run for Congress because I cannot stand what is happening to our country. I'm the one who will do it for the right reasons. I know there's other people up here that will too. I'm doing this for the right reasons. This is not a vanity play for me. Honestly, as a person, I'd much rather be in my home with the best friend in the world, which is my wife and my little 8-year-old Connor. But I'm stepping up to serve because I know I can win this thing. Hillary won this. My last thought before handing this microphone over, I want everyone to consider this. Hillary won this district because she kept 96% of the Dems, 65% of the NPPs, and about 10% of the Republicans. We cannot do this in many other ways or in any other way as Democrats. We've got to keep the Democratic base solid, and that's not what is happening. I can keep that solid, and I have never strayed from my democratic values in the slightest. Yet I can pull 1/3 of my financing from Republicans because of this healthcare initiative. And that is my central issue. It's not my only issue. It's just that I'm really good at it. It's all I've ever done. I understand drug regulation and pricing and lobbying and regulation and the FDA, and I have worked on the Hill. Senators and congressmen, I've worked in 5 nations helping them change their laws in healthcare. It is what is going to give me political leverage that I will then use for you, because when I'm helping this nation as a key figure of those 435 that knows about healthcare and is going to dive in and do immediate changes, and I vowed to do 3 bills before I even get in there. I'm writing them all right now. I will have the leverage to then use that political might in order to affect change in this district for all of the things that we have been discussing tonight. So Hans Keirstead for Congress. It's with humility I accept this, standing up here in your support, and I thank you for all that you're doing in helping us turn this blue. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are a very divided nation, and our nation's motto is E pluribus unum, which means out of many we are one. When you apply for a job or when you hire an employee, you look at one's resume, you look at their resume, and you see what they've done. You look at their experience, you look at their education. And I'm asking all of you, as the employers, to look at all of the resumes of the candidates. And I promise you, if you look at each of them objectively, you will find that I am the only candidate that has the experience, the education, to handle the job on day one. I have worked with presidents, I've worked with secretaries of state, I've worked with FBI Director Comey, I've worked with CIA Director Brennan. But I don't want you to vote for me just because of my experience. I want you to vote for me because I am a known problem solver and can handle the issues that will face our nation, that do face our nation. When you are in the ballot box, it's going to be you and that ballot. And you're going to be looking at all of those names. And I want you to remember the name Omar Siddiqui. Siddiqui means fighter for the truth. That's what it means, fighter for the truth. And that's ultimately everything that I do every day as an engineer, as a trial attorney. I'll close with a short story of my father and how I even am here before you. My father was an engineer at a very young age, born in British India in the 1930s. My father, being a very young engineer, was advised by a British officer who advised my grandfather, don't let your talented son stay here in the war-torn post-World War II British India as it's dividing itself. Send him to the future. So my grandfather asked this British officer, well, where would that be? And the British officer said, that's America. That's the future. But of course, my grandparents didn't have the resources or the means to send Dad to America. So what they did is this British officer helped my dad apply to grad schools. And of all the universities in our great nation, the first university that responded for a master's degree in engineering admissions letter to my father was the University of Minnesota. The Golden Gophers. Dad didn't have a way to get here. So this British officer helped my dad get on a Polish ship from the port to Southampton. And my dad had to change ships and got on board a troop transport ship by the name of the Grey Ghost, which is commonly known as the Queen Mary. So as my dad is on the deck of the Queen Mary, he remembers being woken one early morning. You're going to see her. You should see this. He remembers standing on the deck of the Queen Mary, right where the M is. And he remembers seeing that torch, getting chills, and other people telling him, like, look, isn't she beautiful? Because it wasn't a beautiful statue they were looking at. What they were looking at was hope. What they were looking at was the dreams of our nation. As my dad enters the port, the immigration officer asks him, of course this is before TSA, before passports, before Homeland Security, what are you doing here, son? And my dad shows him the admissions letter. That's how my dad gets into the United States, on an admissions letter. Sign here. Dad signs with the pencil. My dad then had to make his way from the port to the bus station to make his way to Minnesota. So he hails a cab. A native New Yorker cab driver picks him up. And that native New Yorker asks my father, "Where's all your stuff, son?" And my dad's like, "All I have is this admission letter." This native New Yorker looks at him and says, "You're going to freeze to death, son. You're going to freeze in the New York winter, let alone a Minnesota winter." So this native New Yorker cab driver drives Dad to a used clothing store and picks him up boots and jackets and hats and mittens. And my dad, of course, was very embarrassed. I'm not going to be able to pay this guy for this, let alone the cab fare. But the native New Yorker said, "You know what, son, it's on me. But you're going to make me a promise. You're going to promise that you're going to make something of yourself and you're going to pay it back to your new home." Dad made his way to Minnesota, graduated with a master's, got recruited to California to work on the water projects by Governor Brown, yes, the father of the current Governor Brown. And that's why and how I ended up being born in Orange County. I never forget that journey. I never forget every time I hear the words Queen Mary, or when I take my kids, my two young daughters, to play on the very decks of the Queen Mary that my father slept on that bench under the stars. Because that is making America great again. That is the country we used to be, and that is the country I will bring back. Please vote for Omar Siddiqui, advocate for the truth, www.omarinthehouse.com. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I think I'm getting used to this mic level thing. Hey, keep it higher. Okay. So, a little bit more about me. If you guys have seen the website, I was born in Indiana. My father was a 34-year Marine vet, served in Vietnam and in Desert Storm. I have, I've loved a gay man for my entire life, and I actually like his husband too, my brother. And I'm proud to say that I'll never take NRA money. I'd also say that on the issues related to our nation, or I should say our district, what I agree with, that we have to get the nuclear waste out of San Onofre. We can't have offshore oil well drilling, and we need to do something about the noise levels that are coming out of the airport. On Saturday afternoon, after all the parades were over, I was out knocking on doors, and I was on Ruby Street on Balboa Island. And I was in this lady's living room, and literally the windows were shaking as the aircraft were taking off. We've got to do something about it. We've got to change the flight paths, or at least randomize the flight paths so it's not every 30 seconds. So that'll be one of the key issues I take care of when I get to Congress. I hope that you consider at least going to the website and looking at what I have to say. I have a lifelong career of public service and business and corporate experience, and I hope that you'll consider my candidacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of policy that I would want to enact right away, it really does come down to economics. And I think a lot about the struggle that so many families today are dealing with. One of the ways in which we could actually boost our economy almost overnight would be equal pay for equal work. So I would start there. Thank you. It would add 3% growth to our national economy. It would create more jobs, but I wouldn't stop there. I would also look at paid family leave. Paid family leave is something that most industrialized nations in the world have. And we can no longer compete by staying at the bottom as America. We have the right to better health outcomes. We have the right to take care of our families when they're sick, when we're giving birth. We have a right. We just need to demand more from our leaders. So it's an economic issue as well. But when I think about economics, it's not abstract. I think about the people who are working hard but watching their wages disappear, and quite literally, thanks to Trump, their tips as well. I look at how people are scared. They're one check away from a health crisis or losing their home because they can't pay their rent. I've been there. I also had a health crisis. I almost died. And it took 2 years to recover. And I know what that journey is like. And I have so much heart for what people go through in this country who also have a medical condition. We have to expect more. We have some of the worst health outcomes in the world. We're number 50 when it comes to maternal mortality. Why is giving birth the most dangerous thing you can do as a woman of color in America? That's not okay. We need to fix that. Finally, when I look at the things that I've worked on around the world, I've been on the board of the world's largest NGO in post-conflict reconstruction and relief. I've been working on disasters. I was part of the Google Rapid Response Disaster Team. I actually helped create the People Finder, which is what we used to find people after Hurricane Katrina, and then from that point on in every disaster since. I was there on the ground floor when disaster struck in Japan. And my team worked with my colleagues in Japan to help them find their employees. I got a call from the chief information officer of Sony, help us find our people. These are the sorts of crises that I've lived through and been part of, finding constructive solutions. So the other piece of legislation that I would want to introduce is America's Rapid Response Plan. Because climate change is no joke, it's not going away, and no matter how much we deny it, it's not going to make it less. So what we should do is have rapid response teams in every locale, in coordination with FEMA, where we have pre-authorized budgets, we have disaster plans, they're rolled up to the federal government, and the federal government has a zero-friction policy on responding to any crisis, by the way, earthquakes and fires included. So I would say, in a time where there's increasing uncertainty, it's the job of the leaders of the country to provide a foundation of strength, the ability to respond quickly in times of crisis, and the ability to be trusted by the people they are supposed to represent. And we should demand more, and I would be honored to work alongside and with you in that capacity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Boy, there's a lot we didn't cover tonight. We didn't talk about income inequality, wealth inequality, the fact that Bezos and Gates and Buffett, collectively, their wealth is equal to the bottom 50% of our country. That's 170 million people. Let that sink in. 3 people have the same wealth as 170 million Americans. We have a shrinking middle class that has been at the worst point since World War II. We have to focus on creating jobs in our country. We have to focus on creating that through numerous opportunities, through infrastructure opportunities, which will help in the short term. In the long term, if you go on my website, you will see I'm calling for free college education for the bottom quartile of students in our country. Why? Because if we move those lower quartile students into college education or trade school opportunities, we know they're going to pay more taxes the next 40 years of their life in whole. It will more than pay for the program. It will stop the impact they have on social services, and it will raise every single business we have by having a greater spending economy. And it breaks the cycle of poverty. We haven't talked about social injustice, the fact that the United States represents 4.5% of the world's population, and we have 25% of its prisoners. And those 25% of the prisoners, 40% of them are blacks and Latinos. And we have a for-profit prison system that is nothing more than a process of moving people of color into prison for the benefit of these for-profit prison systems. This is social injustice that we haven't seen in our country in decades that we need to stand up and fight. We have right now the Trump administration and the alt-right in a full-fledged assault on our rights, whether it is immigrant rights, refugee rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, voter rights, worker rights, you name it. They are attacking us from every angle. Now more than ever, we need to be standing shoulder to shoulder, locked arm in arm, and thwarting that continued challenge that's put forth by Trump and his folks. And I'm reminded of Martin Niemöller. He was a man of the cloth in Germany during World War II. And at first, he bought into Adolf Hitler's rhetoric about taking the country back, about pride in country. And as time went by, he saw what was actually happening and spoke out. And you've probably seen his famous quote. His famous quote was along the lines, first they came for the trade unionist, but I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the socialist. I did not speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out because I wasn't Jewish. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. That's where we are in our country right now. Our president has made hate and violence acceptable. And we need to fight back. And to successfully fight back means we need passionate leaders who are willing to take the fight back to them. And I am ready to do that, and I ask for your support. I boxed when I was younger. I can take a punch, and I can throw a punch, and I'd love to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Before everyone goes, if you would like to see this whole entire show that we had today, which was great, go to Costa Mesa Brief. You can find it on YouTube, Costa Mesa Brief, or facebook.com/Costa Mesa Brief, or email costamesabrief@gmail.com. Thank you very much.